With that, I will recognize Mr. Whitaker for a 2011 audit report.
Good evening. We have audited the city's financial statements for the year ending June 30, 2011, and have issued an unqualified opinion on the financial statements, which means that the city's financial statements are in accordance with governmental accounting standards. If it pleases the mayor and council, I'd like to go over the city's general fund just for a few minutes. And if you have your audits, you can follow along on page 14, where the general fund is showing a total fund balance at the end of the year of $2,460,000. That is 25.4% of current year expenditures, and that's pretty good for the city. However, your unassigned fund balance at year end amounted to $1,964,000, which is approximately 20% of expenditures and transfers. And you usually try to strive for a 25% factor there. On page 16 is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. The city did have a pretty good year. The net change in fund balance for the year amounted to $1,092,000. Included in there is the $697,000 that the city did buy the Wisteria property. And you will also notice that there's a $697,000 debt proceeds there. If you did not borrow the money to buy that land, then of course the net change in fund balance would have been more like $300,000. The city did have a pretty good budget to actual report. The final budget of $9,897,000 versus the actual revenues of $10,063,000. You had final budget expenditures of $8,966,000, and you had $8,781,000 actual, which is a positive $184,000. Also, the city's debt for the end of the year, on page 36, the total long-term debt amounted to $11,125,000. You had increases for the purchase of the Wisteria property, and then you also had approximately $1,700,000, $1,800,000 in principal payments. So overall, I believe the city's general fund is in a pretty good condition as of June 30, 2011. If you have any other questions, I'll be glad to strive to answer those.
Any questions? Councilwoman Kraus.
Mr. Whitaker, thank you for that explanation. Being my first time on council with this budget, I hope I'm not redundant, but I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
If you look on page 16, which is where you started, what is the appropriate balance to have as a fund balance for the city of our size? Yes.
The unassigned fund balance for the general fund is approximately 25% of expenditures. That's what you strive for.
Okay.
I know cities that have significantly less, and I know cities that have significantly more.
And you have stated that we're right in that realm, right in that ratio.
Your unassigned is approximately 20%. So you could do to increase it 5%.
5%. Okay, if you would look back on page 3, keeping your hand on 16, please. If I can get there. Okay, and under financial highlights, go down to the 4th billet. At the end of the current fiscal year, unassigned fund balance for the general fund was $1,964,895. And if I am redundant in saying this after what you said, and go back to page 16, and that fund balance for the end of the year is $2,460,661.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is there a difference?
Okay,
Am
look
I
on
not
page
looking at this
14.
right?
Yes, ma'am, that's a good question. Look on page 14 if you would. Fund balance is broken down in several categories. If you look under the general fund and look down there under fund balances, you can see non-spendable items, which is prepaid items, of $143,000 represents non-spendable fund balance. And then you have assigned fund balance, which is appropriated for the 2012 budget of $352,000. And then you have the unassigned fund balance of $1,954,000.
Okay.
So it's broken down. The total is $2,460,000.
Okay.
But where you try to get the 25% is the unassigned. That's available for future budgets.
Unassigned. Okay. On page 18, please. It'll be in the middle of the page under capital expenditures, under public safety. The original budget shows 45.5. The final budget shows 28.5. The actual has no amount at all, so there's a variance of 28,500. Was there a purchase? Wasn't there a purchase, or where is that money, or am I just not looking at this correctly?
Well, it's saying it wasn't a purchase that was coded to capital outlay. So there was a significant amount of capital outlay for the police department, but in the general fund, it wasn't showing up there. There was some capital outlay in the confiscated asset fund, a significant amount in the splosh funds, but I'm not showing equipment that was purchased during 2011.
So we moved money from one place to another place. Is that what you're trying to tell me, or?
I'm saying we didn't use the budget line item for that amount. We didn't move money that I'm aware of.
That may be a question that the city manager would may be easier to answer than Mr. Whitaker.
I would need to go back and look at exactly what the, excuse me, what was budgeted in the police for 28.5. But as Mr. Whitaker says, whatever that was for, it was not spent.
Okay, and it's also the same for Parks and Recreation. We're looking at 45.5, final budget's 44.5.
Correct. However, in that case, if you'll remember, Mr. Whitaker's reference just a minute ago to the funds that were reserved. Let me find the page number. That were assigned on page 14, part of the 352,046, includes some of that 44,500, which was budgeted for truck and some other equipment expenditures, which was in the 2011 budget, but was not spent during that fiscal year, and was appropriated over to the fiscal year 2012 budget to purchase that equipment. So that equipment has been purchased. It was just purchased in 2012 instead of 2011.
If you look at the line item right below it, also on page 18, the public works, where we budgeted $335,000. Same thing.
Okay. All right.
For public works, we just didn't pave any streets, and those streets have been paved in this fiscal year.
Mr. Whitaker, would it be safe to say that those three figures there would add up to our on page 3 are
Assigned?
are assigned?
Yes, sir.
That would be those three items
For the most part,
Thank
yes,
you.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker.
Any further questions?
Yes, if I could. Mr. Whitaker, if you don't mind, I wrote a few down here. If I can just give you these, and we'll just go over them one at a time. Some you may not have an answer for right now, and some you may, so. And I'm gonna be working from the, having a chance to look at everything. I'm gonna work from this document here, which I think is the associated document that comes with
is,
the thing, so.
yes.
In the findings section, 10.4B, expenditures over budget appropriations, you listed a repeat finding. Now, and I guess my first question there is what department exceeded the budget to create that violation? I think is,
Okay, it was the purchase of the wisteria land. It was approved by mayor and council. It just was not passed, the budget was not, approved by mayor and council. The amendment was not approved, was not properly approved, and I'm gonna say this about that. Mr. Treadway did call me and discuss this, how to properly account for the lease, the purchase by the DDA of the property, and then the lease back. And it was a miscommunication. I thought it was a decision, either the city was going to buy it or the DDA was going to buy it. And the DDA ended up buying it, so I was not aware of the lease back purchase, part of the agreement. So that's probably why it was not properly approved.
and being a repeat finding, I'm guessing this happened again in the previous fiscal year?
Yes, sir.
And do you have any recollection of what that would have been?
I do not. It was.
Is that something you can get back to us on?
I can get back to you.
Okay. And then a general question, and Mr. Treadway, this can come to you or Mr. Whitaker, either one. Whose responsibility is it to ensure that departments stay within their budget? The department head or the city manager? I mean, what's the, and I just want clarity. I don't know the answer to the question. I'm just simply asking.
Well, from the legal perspective, it's mine. From an administrative perspective, that's something that I hold the department heads accountable for, but ultimately the responsibility is mine.
Okay, thank you. So what procedures need to be in place that weren't put in place last year for this? And again, I guess we're going back to perhaps this miscue.
It was a miscommunication.
I mean, this is just, but is there a procedure in place so that we don't have miscues?
There is, and we dealt with those in the 2011 budget. As Mr. Whitaker says, the item that called it into question this second time was the purchase of the wisteria property. Absent of that, there were no places where we were at over the budget.
Okay. And again, I appreciate your patience being one of the new members here. I'm trying to weed my way through. And then, as that new council member, what are some of the things that I can look for in these reports that would guide me to know the answer when I review these on a monthly basis? I mean, is there something I can look at particularly that you would recommend?
It would be good if you had a comparison between last year's figures and this year's figures.
Mr. Treadway, is that something we have?
We can get that. It's not in the way the reports are presented now, but that's something we could adjust
So
our reports
that's a
and
recommendation
do.
we might consider?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And then also you got a comparison of your budget comparison.
Right. Okay.
One thing, if I might, and I referenced it in a memo I sent to you all earlier, and can show it in the mid-year financial report. One of the new things we did this year, and Jan did an excellent job with it, is we developed what we're calling a cash flow budget. Because if you look at the city's budget and you look at the monthly reports you get, things are reported on a percentage of the year that's passed. And for example, if at the end of the third month, we may show that a revenue coming in at 5% instead of 30%. Well, that's because some of the revenues just don't come in on an equal basis. They come in at specific points during the course of the fiscal year. What Jan has done this year is gone back and created a cash flow budget, which budgets revenues and expenditures on a month-to-month basis, depending on what we can actually expect to do that month. And through the end of November, I think she was off 0.07%. So we feel pretty good about what we've got in there. But I think that probably is better than. I mean, certainly a year-to-year comparison is helpful. I think also comparing how we look to our projected cash flow budget would also be very helpful to you.
Okay. And one other thing, and again, anytime I read a report that's an audit of our city, you know, there's words that I see, deficiency, you know, it looks like that is a word that you relate to material weakness. Significant deficiency is a control deficiency, and then there's non-compliance. I guess our goal would be, we want to not ever see those words in our audit reports, right? Would we agree on that?
Yes, sir. I'll agree with that 100%. But it's very.
And a woohoo to Jan. Jan, you still here? Woohoo. Thank you, sir.
Any further questions?
I have a question. 11B in your findings, 11.1B, $17,000, excuse me, in workers' comp check. It seems like we lost it, and it seems like that's something we shouldn't do. Is there a way to implement something to make sure we don't have checks floating around that aren't deposited?
I have recommended that we receive or we implement a tickler system. We know we're supposed to have an audit of the workers' comp premiums every year. And so we either know we've got to pay that additional sum or we're going to get a refund. And then we put that on the tickler list, and it's got to be ticked off at some point. And it just, I think we received the check this year, and it must have just gotten lost. I'm not exactly sure what happened to it.
Do you know
But
where
we did
it
get,
was? Or
we did
how long was
request
it
a
missing? And
refund.
did we have to get another check issued
We
because
did
that one
get
was
another
never
check
found?
issued. Yes.
And how long did that take?
Once we notified them, it only took a couple of weeks to get
How
another
long did it
check.
take us to notify them?
I'm not exactly sure the date that we received the notice that we received the refund. I think it may have been 3 months, something like that.
And this new system will shorten that time frame if something doesn't come in when it should? Or
We
when you
should
expect it?
identify the issue before I get here.
Okay. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I would like to point out that this is the city's first comprehensive annual financial report, which in accounting and auditing parlance is a step above and beyond what we have done in the past. It is an effort on our part to be more comprehensive and more transparent with the city's financial condition, both current and in the past. And I would like to commend and recognize Jan Burke, our controller, who led the effort in completing that process this year. It is a comprehensive annual financial report, or CAFR, as you'll hear the accounting geeks call it from time to time, is not something that every city does, and it is something that we'd like to think at least, but you know, well managed and cities in good financial shape are proud to do and do in an effort to raise the bar a little bit on our financial reporting. So I would point out this is our first effort at that, and we will continue to do that, and would again like to commend Jan and all the work she has done for getting us to that point and being able to produce this for the first time this year.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Item number 5